back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast, a Georgia men's basketball edition of the podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. And to get into Georgia basketball talk, I've got 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Isaac Trotter here with me on this Tuesday afternoon. And Isaac, we got a lot to talk about. The Georgia Bulldogs 9-1 as we record this. They are ranked now for just the second time since January 2011. So wanted to have Isaac on, always one of my favorite guests to have on, to talk about Georgia, to talk about SEC basketball, and to talk about kind of the road ahead. But to start this off first, Isaac, thanks so much for taking the time. And I wanted to ask, well, how's the college basketball season been for you so far, even outside of the SEC? How much have you enjoyed the start of the season?
Well, it's been really fun. I think through the first 6 weeks, I feel like I'm in constant projection mode for months leading up to the season. And then the season starts and it's just like information overload of all of these games. You're trying to watch as many teams as you possibly can and kind of get a feel for it. And frankly, just to figure out where you're wrong about all of the preseason stuff that you've done. So I feel like I'm watching 10 to 12 games a week as much as I can, and it's a great time. I would never ever complain about the start to this season and what we have, but I will say this: Georgia might be one of the teams. We'll see how it goes. Be one of the teams I was most wrong about in the preseason because, and we'll let the listeners in on this. Jordan sends out this preseason SEC poll. He goes, "Hey, could you vote in this for me? We'll do this at the end of December." I fill it out. And I have Georgia dead last in the SEC. Dead last. I was not in on the guard play. I thought the point guard room was one of the worst in the SEC. I thought losing Silas Demery and losing Asa Newell was going to be just too big to overcome. And so far, Georgia's been like one of the teams I whiffed on the most. And it's a really interesting dichotomy to see how this team has kind of turned into a juggernaut in transition. And that's the thing, the part of preseason that I love the most is hey, where'd you get right? What'd you get wrong? How do you change your mind about these teams really quickly? And for Georgia, I feel like I've changed my mind about them as much as any team in the country.
Yeah, we didn't bring you on here, Isaac, just to make you the punching bag for putting Georgia last, because a lot of us were wrong. I know at SEC Basketball Media Day, I believe Georgia was 14th. I had them, I think, 12th, which I even thought at the time, kind of being optimistic putting them there, but they've surprised everybody with how they've played to this point. They're now 9-1, as I mentioned. They're ranked. They're now number 25 in the AP poll. And we'll get into the specifics, but from what you've seen right now, is this team for real? Do you think this team is a team that can continue this as we get farther into the season?
I still have some unanswered questions, right? If you're poking holes in Georgia, you could be like, all right, well, the non-conference play is iffy, because you could argue they haven't beaten a tournament team. Like Clemson is still a team that I don't know if they'll make the tournament. They're pretty TBD there. I know Cincinnati's not making the tournament. I know Florida State's not making the tournament. I would be very stunned if Georgia Tech and Xavier make the tournament. So at some stages, we still have some questions. But at the same time, there's kind of a proof of concept emerging with this group. This is the best transition offense in college basketball so far this year. They're averaging 30 points a game in transition. That's crazy to me. And I think it speaks a lot to, the ability of Mike White to be open to change. This guy was not a coach that loved to play fast and push it in transition. I think it does speak to his ability to play to his roster's strengths. And you look at this roster, you be like, yeah, this group probably would make sense getting up and down and trying to push it in transition and being a team that can score within the first 7 seconds of the shot clock. So I do think a lot of what they're doing right now is potentially, something that I think you could build on moving forward. And I'm not going to the schedule's just your schedule. I'm not going to diss them for only playing, maybe they haven't played a tournament team yet, because that second half against Cincy was really, really impressive. I watched that again this morning. The Florida State going on the road and beating a team like that, they just overwhelmed them. Xavier, they're finding ways to win even when you don't play well against Xavier. Clemson, was a tough, rugged game that could have gone either way down the stretch. So there's a lot of lessons still that we have the jury is still out in some ways about this group, but I do feel like their strengths of this roster aren't going anywhere, because it feels like they have really figured out their identity. And that's something you can't necessarily say about everybody in the SEC, especially.
Yeah, we talked to Mike White. I think this was before the season, and he talked about as they were getting guys in the portal, they kind of let the players they got dictate how they played. They didn't come in and say, "Look, this is exactly how we want to play, and these are the guys we're going to get." They kind of did it the other way around, which I think, on one side it can be dangerous when you're kind of, let's bring these guys in and decide. But to me, the style of play they are playing right now, I mean, it fits what these guys are best at to a T.
It is, and I think the portal evaluations are really reaping the benefits here because Jeremiah Wilkinson's a stud, like a complete stud. I would argue, and I'm part of the portal rankings team, we underranked him a smidge, and he has been outstanding. And I think the transition aspect of that fits his game perfectly. He's not the biggest, strongest guy, but that first step is terrific. His push ahead passes have been really, really good this year. They get out and go. I think this is a really good like this. I knew this team was going to be a good rebounding team just because I have a lot of respect for Santos Surreal and some of the length and athleticism they have. But I think I really am most impressed with how all of these guards are just so unselfish and get off of it. Like Blue Cane gets it and goes in transition. Like same type of deal with Wilkinson, just gets it and goes. Jordan Ross, I think he still kind of wants to play a little bit more methodical than Speedy, but like he's even started to understand like what his job description is. And when you can run and when you have two guards like Wilkinson and Blue Cane that can make really good decisions in the open floor, that gives you a really, really high floor. And I think that this team is shaping up to be a tournament team. Like I still think that like that what they've done so far earlier, like they haven't hurt themselves in any regard. Like I don't think they're going to be a top 25 team all season long, in my opinion. But I could easily see a scenario where this is an 8 or 9 seed again. And for Georgia basketball, that's probably a really good step in the right direction.
100%. I mean, I thought the goal going into this year, if you were able to go to the tournament back to back years, huge accomplishment. And as I said earlier, it was not one that I thought they were going to hit. But to this point, they're off to a great start. You mentioned Jeremiah Wilkinson. I wanted to shout him out. I just love watching him around the rim, man. He makes layups that I'm like, there's just no way he's getting that up. He's leading the team right now, 17.1 points per game. I did want to shout out another guy and get your thoughts because this was a guy I was just really interested to see how Georgia used him, and that's Smurf Millender from UTSA. Done a great job. He hit the go-ahead shot late in the game against Xavier. Comes off the bench, and I think really he's one of the key guys in the way they're playing. The fact he's not starting, but he comes in there and I think really picks up where Jordan Ross leaves off, is able to create, but also is a very dangerous shooter. What have been your impressions of what you've seen from Smurf?
He's got a little bit more bag than I thought. I think even against in their last game in that big win over Cincinnati, like they used him in like booty ball actions to go target Kerr Kriisa, and because Kerr Kriisa is like a cone defensively, they're able to mix and match with him a little bit, and that's just like the value of what this group is like it feels like he comes into the game kind of knowing exactly what my job description is. Just kind of walks on the floor knowing, hey, what's my job description? And for the most part, I think that like his playmaking has been more additive than subtractive. Like, yeah, like he has a turnover rate that's a little bit high right now, but he's leading the team in assist rate. I think it's a close to 30% assist rate. So you're getting more from him. Like even though like some of the turnovers are there, like he's been able to create more buckets than he's hurting you. And that's been helpful. Honestly, too, defensively, that was my big concern with him. It's like, okay, he's 5'11", can he hold up against SEC like lead guards? And we still have to figure that out. But for the most part, I think you feel more encouraged than discouraged with what he's shown on the defensive end. And if he's your fourth or fifth guard in the rotation, that's probably a pretty good sign of the depth you've accrued.
100%. And let's talk about that depth. I want to shout out Mike Mobley, Georgia's SID, who's had this stat. Georgia's the only power conference team with an 11-player rotation. Every player is averaging double-digit minutes. Every player has played in every game. To me, looking and trying to, like we talked about earlier, trying to project long term, we like watching this tempo, but my question has just been, is it sustainable? But Isaac, the thing I keep coming back to, they keep rotating in 11 guys, and the fall off is not significant. Do you think that they have what it takes to sustain how fast they're playing throughout an entire season?
I think it will be dictated by some of the teams that they go up against. I think certain teams will be able to dictate their tempo a little bit more than others. But I think for the most part, like Georgia's DNA isn't going anywhere. And I think the depth is a great point because it feels like, like Santos Surreal, when he comes off the floor, it feels like your rim defense should get worse, right? Well, I looked it up. Like Georgia's rim defense is the same when Santos Surreal exits. And that's not because Santos like bad or anything, right? Like teams are shooting just 48% at the rim when Santos Surreal's on the floor. And I filtered out the garbage teams that they played. That was just against the top 150 teams that they played. And when he sits, it's at 49%. There's no difference. I think that speaks a lot to Abson. I think that speaks a lot to the length that they've accrued in that front court. And some of the young guys like that they're coming off the bench, like, Kareem Stagg's minutes aren't perfect this year. He makes mistakes, but he plays really hard. And I think that's one thing that like I've noticed with like some of these second unit guys, like the effort, the energy, whatever they're on the floor, like the effort and high motor stuff is always there. And that, it feels like, there's so many teams where it's like, oh, they got to be so precise and like everything has to go right on this possession for it to work. A lot of those times, like it feels like those high effort teams can cover up some of the warts in your X's and O's, or maybe you don't execute quite as well because you just play so hard and your energy is so high. And I think that's Jake Wilkins, another one, like it gives him something when he comes in off the bench and plays with that motor. And that's really, really encouraging. Although I do wonder, like once push comes to shove, I'm curious if 11 guys are going to stick in this rotation long term because it feels like when push comes to shove and it's like all the chips are in, we know who's going to be on the floor. And like that starts with Blue Kane, who I think has been maybe one of the most improved players in the country this year. He's been awesome.
Well, let's talk about Blue. What sort of stood out to you about what he's done? Because you look at the building blocks of this program the last few years, the three guys that had stuck around, it was Blue Kane, it was Silas Demery Jr., and it was Dylan James. Silas leaves after a really good season last year. And all of us around the program look to Blue and say, this team probably goes as far as Blue can take them. What do you like about what he's done so far this season?
I just feel like he's simplified his game. He is really, really decisive with his drives. He's slippery. I think he just is constantly getting into the paint, drawing two to the ball, making good decisions off of that. 16-3 assist to turnover ratio in the 5 games against high major teams this year. Like you'll take that all day, every day. Like he's just so additive. And, he's posted like the best offensive numbers of his career while not making threes. Like we know he's going to make threes. Like he's 30% on his open catch and shoot threes, according to Synergy, as I was looking that up this morning. Like he is going to make shots eventually. And he's still become like posting the best offensive numbers efficiency wise of his career. Like he's being able to get to the rim more. He's playing off of 2 feet at a really high level. He's drawing more fouls, getting to the free throw line. He's automatic from the free throw line. He's in transition, playing with great pace and great like decisiveness of like understanding how to read defenses and find his open spots and get downhill. Like he's just awesome. He's just awesome. And I even think defensively, like, has he been their best perimeter guard defensively? I think you might have to argue that. So he's been just everything you'd want and then some this year. And I think he really is like that glue that connects this team. Because you're right, like feels like Wilkinson's like transition stuff is like that, like the powder keg, like that adds a little bit. Like the Wilkins, like enormous tomahawk dunks or whatever, the windmill dunks are just like, wow, that's all the fun stuff. And like hand catching's like the heaters that he's going to go on from 3. That's the fun stuff. But it's like the non-sexy things that Blue Kane is doing that I think is really impacting winning. Him and Santo are really like carrying the torch for that group. And I feel like the SEC, like it's been a little bit down this year, but like the guard play is still legit night in and night out, and you got to feel like you have a chance. Like when you're walking into those matchups, it's like, hey, can we win our matchups here from the guard spot? I think Georgia does feel like, hey, we have a chance to win our guard matchup every single time that we walk on the floor because Blue Kane's a dude and Wilkinson has turned himself into a really, really nice player.
Yeah, Wilkinson was a huge addition this offseason. I think, along with Blue Kane, they really wanted to put pieces around him in that backcourt, and so far those guys have really stood out. Wanted to read some of the statistics. Georgia right now, number 1 nationally in scoring offense, 98.3 points per game. Scoring margin, plus 27.7. Fast break scoring, 27.6, and blocks, 8.5 blocks per game. Ken Palm has Georgia as the nation's 3rd quickest average offensive possession, 14.2 seconds. The 5th fastest adjusted tempo, 74.8 possessions per 40 minutes. You mentioned a few minutes ago, Isaac, the Blue Kane, kind of struggling from 3. one of the big negatives in a non-conference run that has had a lot of positive has been the way this team shoots from three. They're only shooting 30%. There's been games where you've seen market improvement, and then there's been games where they've struggled and they've played inferior opponents, so you can kind of see them just really like, we're going to keep shooting threes until we make this thing work. How much concern do you think Georgia fans should have about the 3 point struggles, most like specifically because of the fast tempo? To me, it feels like if those 3 point issues continue and persist, it could really hurt this team. How concerned are you about what they've done from three so far?
I'm a little concerned. I think one trend that we saw last year was teams that didn't have a shooter at point guard and didn't have a shooter at the five. Their offenses like tended to sputter out a little bit against high major teams because teams could just shrink the floor. It just is hard. It's hard to score when your point guard doesn't shoot threes and your center isn't a floor stretcher. That's kind of what Georgia's running into right now. Like Jordan Ross isn't somebody that you really trust to be a guy that can make 3 or 4 threes in a game. Santos Surreal at the five obviously isn't a floor stretcher. You don't want him to be, right? Like he is a absolute freak show in the paint. Like I don't need my monster dude taking 22 footers. But that is certainly going to be a concern, I think, for this group as they continue to work things out, because they also don't have a ton of 3-point shooting at the four at times. I don't think their best defensive lineups come when Cannon Catchings is playing the four. So it's like you're kind of like workshopping, like, hey, how do we be our best version offensively? And then how do we be our best version defensively? And can we tie those lineups together? Like, that's a little clunky. And that's part of the question, like maybe my concerns moving forward is like, can they play their best offensive lineups and their best defensive lineups at the same time? So far, that's no. And they've covered that up with just being unbelievable in transition offense and not having to worry about, actually running stuff in the half court as offense. So it is going to be a concern. But at the same time, I know Blue Cane's going to shoot better than 30% from three. I know Cannon Catchings is going to have nights where he could make 5 or 6 in a game. Like that's his MO. And you're going to need those in big spots, I think, that can tilt different games for you. And if you get them at the right time, it could be, a quad one victory that you're able to get if you catch that one night where Cannon Catchings goes off. And his growth, he may be the biggest X factor for this team, because I do think his growth defensively, like, could really unlock the best version of Georgia if he is able to actually be a guy that they can trust to get after it on the glass, be physical, be able to stretch the floor from the 4 spot, and like be an asset defensively. And so far, he just hasn't been. Like, all of the advanced metrics point to him being Georgia's worst defender of the rotation players. That can't stick moving forward if they want to be their kind of get their best offensive lineups on the floor at the same time.
100% agree with you, Isaac. And going back before the season, every year, especially now that the portal is such a big part of building these teams, I try to pick a Georgia player that I say the team will go as far as this guy can go. Like, he's kind of the X factor. And I saw Cannon Catchings as that, because just watching some of his highlights from BYU, you saw him, I think Baylor, man, he just could not miss. Had a fantastic game, and the potential's there. He was a guy coming out of high school, some people projected as a one and done. To me, I'm glad you kind of, really focused on Cannon, because I think he is such an important part of how far this team can go this year.
He's so toolsy. He just is so toolsy. And like, that's like it's tough for guys like that when you're 6'9" and you could shoot like that. It's like you almost feel like the 3-point shooting is going to get you to the NBA, but at the same time, it does feel like it's all the little things that really get you paid at this rate. It feels like it's the defense, it's the rebounding, it's the how many positions can you guard? Like, do you make good decisions when the ball is in your hands? Like, those are all of the little things with him that he just has to keep stacking those winning plays and keep getting better. And, he fell out of the rotation at BYU last year because he couldn't guard. Just simple as that. And so, like, that is going to be the big challenge for him moving forward, especially as they play, better competition. And especially in this version of the SEC where it's like, look, if we're going to play you at the 4, like, we're going to go up against Florida. Florida's going to have like 3 guys who are 6'9" on the floor or taller at all times. Like, if you want to go play, against Arkansas, like, they got Trevon Brazile at the 4, who's like a freak show wing. Like, LSU is a double big lineup. Like, Auburn is playing a lot of really talented 4s that can pass and dribble and shoot. And Vandy's 4s are just like rugged. Like, you got to box out. And like, if he doesn't want to do all those things at a high level, it's going to be hard to play him, because I do think at this core, like, defense, interior defense, and paint dominance is still their best recipe to winning. And like so far, like that's been like a great, asset for them. I think they're shooting like 63% on twos and their opponents are like 40 something percent. That 20 percentage gap is like really good. Like that's you're going to win a whole lot of basketball games when I take twos and you don't get to take twos, right? Like that's just how the game works. And I feel like if he can be a part of their best defensive lineup moving forward, that just totally unlocks the recipe moving forward, because him at the 4, like that's a terrifying guy to try to like chase around with how dynamic of a shot maker he can be when he gets it humming.
You talked about the work in the paint. They love to dunk the basketball, which I've always been a proponent. If you want to just take the easy points, just go up and dunk it. And like we talked about, they got guys that love to throw it down.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the Wilkins dunk that from earlier this year is just like, oh, I wonder where you got that one from. But like Santos Surreal is like, he a 99th percentile athlete like in college basketball? Like you just like 6'11", 260, runs like a deer, chiseled. Like it's just like how do you look the way that you look? Like he is like a freak show type of front court player, and he really does change he's one of those guys that like he gets off the bus and you're like, oh boy, like we have to go up against that today. And I do think that decision to be able to keep him out of the portal is really an under the radar X factor, because like I think a lot of teams, especially in the 2025 market last spring, like bigs were just getting like outrageous money. You could average 5 and 5 and you were getting like real money, like close to upper 6 figures. So Georgia being able to invest and keep a guy like Samto in the program is really enormous, because you just don't have another guy that looks like him on this roster.
No, and I don't think Georgia would have been able to go get a guy had he left, through the portal. It would have been very hard. So yeah, that was huge. That was just being able to retain him. You could argue one of the bigger moves they made in the offseason. Isaac, we talked about the non-conference competition. I wrote about this a few days ago. The teams that Georgia played in November, they were 30 and 31 overall. So they were not really all that good, and it's not getting any better before non-conference play ends. They've got Western Carolina this week, then they play West Georgia and Long Island. So there's not going to be any more real big tests. So, we're being cautious because we understand the competition they played. But from what you've seen to this point, what are the areas that you say, all right, Georgia does have to get better at this if they want to sustain this kind of success once they get in SEC play?
Yeah, one stat I was looking at is like Georgia's guards have especially their point guard situation, like the Jordan Ross Smurf Millender combination, like they have a pretty high turnover rate in pick and rolls. That's one thing that I think has to come down, because like let's just be honest, like you're like right now, like you're just not going to be able to score 30 transition points a game in SEC play. Like even though the SEC is run and gun, and even though you're able to get out in the open floor, like it's just not going to work. Like that's not sustainable, because the guards are too good. You're not going to be able to rip the ball away and get those easy, run and jump dunks that Georgia has lived off of throughout the early parts of the first 6 weeks of the season. So I think the point guard play is still continually something that I'm really looking on. Can Ross settle in? I think he's missed more shots at the rim than I would have expected. He needs to learn how to play off of 2 feet a little bit better, be able to make good decisions when the ball is in his hands. That's going to be something that's really huge. And if that is a hot spot, maybe that's just where this staff has to pivot. And it's like, hey, Blue, like you got to handle more of that on-ball responsibilities, even more than you already are. Wilkinson has to handle even more of those on-ball responsibilities as well. That could be, an option as well. So I just feel like there's still some kinks to work out with this half-court offense, because I think the recipe for a lot of SEC teams when they play Georgia is like, if we just keep them out of transition and force them to play a half-court game, we think that we can find enough stops, because they're not a great shooting team and their point guards turn it over. And so like that's something that I think they're going to have to address moving forward, and something I'll be really honed in on early, especially in early January when they play, is it Auburn, Florida, South Carolina, I think are their first 3 games, like all at South Carolina on the road, which is a really good defense that doesn't let you get out in transition. We'll learn a lot about how real or how fake Georgia's offense is in those first 3 games.
Definitely something to watch with the half-court offense. I think it was the Clemson game where Clemson was able to slow that pace down, and you could just tell that it totally affected how Georgia played.
And Clemson was like they play three bigs, which is kind of similar to what not three bigs. It's like two bigs and then a 6'10" wing. Like so they just have a lot of perimeter size and they switch everything and they really do force you to play like ISO ball, ISO heavy ball, and don't let you reverse the basketball and get easy paint touches and get two to the ball and just kind of get the ball popping. They kind of force you to dribble, not pass. And so that's something that I think I was actually kind of impressed with how Georgia operated in that game. Like it wasn't pretty in every aspect, but for the most part, I left that game being like, okay, like this isn't like a disaster. Like there's still obviously lots of stuff to work with here. So that's going to be something moving forward that I think that we'll find out pretty quickly because like Florida just is so good on the glass that they're just not going to let you get those easy runouts for the most part. Auburn, you could get some of those, but that's still a team like Auburn's best defense might be an offense that just makes you take it out of the net over and over again because they're so good offensively. And then South Carolina, like Lamont Paris is like, yeah, you guys are scoring 6 transition points tonight. We are not letting you run. You're going to play in the mud. Welcome to the slog. And like that's where I feel like the execution of this half court offense is going to have to be really, really on point.
I want to take a quick break, come back, and then talk about the SEC as a whole and just maybe where the Bulldogs fit in it. Isaac, we're recording this on December 16th, so we've seen the majority of non-conference play for all the teams, all the SEC teams. What's your impression of this conference this year? It felt like there was a consensus before the season started that, hey, it can't be as good as last year because of all the veterans, all the COVID guys that have moved on. What do you make of what you've seen of the conference as a whole to this point?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a little bit down, no question. And it should have been like there was no way to sustain what it was, and especially I think the one stat I was leaning on is like 26 of the top 30 scores from the SEC last year departed, whether that was through the portal, the NBA, or exhausted eligibility. So like, of course, it was going to take a little bit of a downturn because there's so many new faces in new places. So I think the Big 10 and the Big 12 have passed the SEC, but the SEC is still like number one in like the predictive metrics on KenPom. I don't agree with that. I think they're third right now. And it feels like a lot of teams that like are kind of figuring out like who we are and what we're great at. Like I don't know who the favorite of the SEC is. It's crazy. Like Vanderbilt by all betting odds is the favorite. Like that's crazy to me. They're really, really good. I still have some questions about them moving forward, but they clearly have a proof of concept. That offense has been humming. The guard play is terrific. But like, would anyone be surprised if we look up in mid-February and Duke Miles isn't the most efficient offensive player in the country and Frankie Collins like kind of reverts back to being Frankie Collins again, and Tyler Tanner isn't like quite as humming at a high level as it is right now? Like no one would be surprised about that. So it's weird. Like conference play starts next month and I don't know who's going to win the league. As weird as it sounds, I kind of think it's Florida. Like, even though everything has gone wrong for them so far in the early going, I think that Florida's strengths are stuff that travels every night. Like their rim defense is terrific. They're constantly scoring more points in the paint than their opponents. I think those things travel, and the 3-point shooting and the turnovers are something that like, hey, on the nights when the threes go in or the turnovers don't happen, I think Florida's going to win by margin. And those are the huge X factors, because I do think Boogie Fland's a good basketball player. He just hasn't played like one so far. And once Boogie like returns to like his, previous norms, I think that Florida could assert itself as the best team in a league that really is, so wide open here on December 16th.
Yeah, I think the lesson from the last few years is like, hey, don't make too much of non-conference losses, especially when you're playing elite teams, and that explains like Florida's situation. And you mentioned us doing this SEC poll every week. We'll do the next one the last week of December, but it's going to be fun for me, Isaac, just following how different it looks. Like in the span of 3 weeks, we may look at the poll and it looks like we just flipped it upside down.
No question. Now, I will say this. there are teams that like I thought were pretty decent that I have real concerns about in the SEC right now. Like Missouri is like circling the drain. Like I know that they're 10-2 and like it looks fine, but like if they don't beat Illinois in the bragging rights game this weekend, like they're going to exit non-conference play with their best win being over Minnesota, who's the 16th best team in the Big Ten. Like that's a real concern for them. Mississippi State, that was a team that like I'm just used to Chris Jans always being in the 8-9 game in the NCAA tournament. Josh Hubbard's a little bit banged up right now. Their portals additions have flopped, honestly, and that could be one of the worst teams in the league. And so it's like, Texas A&M, they're a really high variance team. Like the Knights, when their threes go in, they're capable of beating anybody. But when their threes don't go in, like they're going to lose, and they like legitimately could lose to anybody on any night. And so like that's like some of those, because Texas I think is down. Like Oklahoma has real interior questions. So like that's like the thing, you kind of go down this list. It's like last year it felt like night after night. It's like, what did Oklahoma finish in the SEC last year? 10th, and they had a lottery pick on their team. Like this year, this version of the SEC, I don't think has that at all.
Any other SEC teams? You talked a little bit about Vanderbilt that have pleasantly surprised you. That you're like, okay, they might have something going for them going into conference play.
Yeah, Vandy's the right answer there for sure. I think Arkansas has a chance to be a really good team. Talent-wise, Darius Acuff is terrific. Malik Thomas has been a really, really awesome freshman. He's basically iced DJ Wagner and told him like, hey, DJ, you're on the bench now, like, because I'm really good. And so like that is those two freshman guards can really go. And Arkansas just has a ton of size. Like Billy Richmond's a big wing. Carter Knox is a big, strong, physical wing who can put it on your head. And then Trayvon Brazile has played his best basketball. He really has. So I think like the version of Arkansas where Acuff is rolling and Thomas is an instant offense, and they have great size and they're really athletic, and Brazile is banging threes this year. Like that's a really, really talented team. LSU has been a team, like I kind of lumped them in a little bit with Georgia of like, hey, they've won their non-conference game that they were supposed to win, but we still have some questions. Like they got hammered by Texas Tech, and I was like, oh, okay, LSU's frauds. And then the very next time they go out, they go beat a pretty decent SMU team. And so I'm kind of buying a little bit of what LSU is selling in some ways. Like I don't think that's a team that's like no doubt a tournament team, but that's not a bottom seller anymore team. And I think Dedan Thomas, the addition out of UNLV, has certainly helped them, kind of like give them an actual legit point guard. And he's a terrific playmaker, has great feel, super high IQ. I kind of have dubbed it like he has godlike feel in pick and rolls. That's kind of when I watch him. He just has unbelievable feel in ball screens. So I do like watching him play. And I think that LSU is a little bit better than I thought. But for the most part, you kind of go down the list. It's like Bama, a little worse than I thought. Tennessee, a little worse than I thought. Florida, a little worse than I thought. Auburn, for the most part, good for 6 weeks, but like a little inconsistent, right? Like their interior defense isn't a strength. Oklahoma, a little worse than I thought. Kentucky, way, way, way worse than I thought. So like that feels like the thought exercise that really permeates through this SEC right now.
It is wild just trying to think ahead. And I always do this like with football. I predict all the games, and you get into these spots and you're like, somebody has to lose these games. And it goes back to like the conversation, Isaac, with like an LSU. I kind of like going through the preseason, I was like, well, I'm just going to pencil them like 15th or 16th. They may be better than that, which means someone else has to finish 15th or 16th. I think with as much as the conference lost this offseason, man, it might still be like every night you just don't know what you're going to see.
It's a little nuts. And that's why I think it does open the door for like those teams that like even though they haven't won games, they still have legit like real dudes at the top to flex their muscles. And that's why I kind of go back to Florida. Like, I think Tennessee's going to figure it out because Nate Ament is really talented, and he has not played well over the first 6 weeks, but he's really talented. And Jacoby Gillespie's a stud. Like, I think that Gillespie can really almost single-handedly carry them. Oklahoma is another team that I would keep an eye on too in this SEC race because like they got 4 really like legit players. Like Nigel Pack has been around forever and can really score. Xavier Brown is an excellent point guard. Tay Davis has been around for a while, can score. Like, I think we've seen Darian Reed, show flashes of being that 5-star type of prospect. So there are teams here that like the door is open for them to kind of crack it open, but there's no perfect team. Like there really isn't. And last year was so weird. It's like, you had me on the pod, and I feel like we were talking, and we're like, what's Auburn's flaw? I don't really know. Like, kind of good at everything. Hey, what's Florida's flaw? I don't know. They don't really guard the three well some nights, but like they're good at everything. Like, you kind of go down that list of like teams that had a lot of really, really legit strengths. And this year it does feel like there's a little bit more teams that have like, real holes on their roster that could theoretically hold them back from, reaching that elite tip top tier.
To tie this back to Georgia, and it's more so looking at where these teams are now, not like projecting a month or two from now. Where do you kind of see Georgia in this SEC pecking order with what they've done and the concerns that we've tackled in this episode?
Yeah, no, I think that if you're tiering the league, which I think is the easiest way to like kind of understand it, I think Vanderbilt has earned the right to be in that tier one. I think Alabama has earned the right to be in that tier one of teams that could theoretically win it, even though they can't rebound at all against elite teams. Florida, I think, has earned the right to be in that tier one, just because I still think their strengths travel. But then in that tier two, it's like Tennessee, Georgia, or Arkansas. I'd also put in tier one, but that's second tier is like, hey, Tennessee is there. Auburn is a really talented team, but a little bit mercurial. Georgia is a talented team that like I really like the guard play right now with what Blue Kane and Wilkinson have played like. You like the bigs, like they have enough strengths, I think, to put themselves in that tier two. And if they finish top 7, if they earn a 7 seed in the SEC tournament, 6 seed, 8 seed in the SEC tournament, I think that's kind of the range of outcomes that I'm looking at with this group, because I think that like their strengths, there's enough strengths here to make up for some of the deficiencies in a league filled with teams with real deficiencies. You know what I mean?
100%. And I want to get your thoughts too. The very first SEC game that Georgia has, Isaac, I'm fascinated by. They're going to host Auburn on January 3rd. It's an Auburn team that I think has been fairly impressive this year. Now, there's been games when they played superior competition that superior competition has just rolled over them. But what do you make of that matchup on January 3rd? Really, the fact that it's Auburn coming to Athens and Georgia with a golden opportunity to start SEC play on the right foot.
I mean, it's a quad one opportunity for Georgia, and at home, those don't come around too often. So you really want to take advantage of it for NCAA tournament purposes. But you're right. I think for the most part, Auburn's pretty happy with their first 6 weeks. Like, okay, like a road loss to Arizona, no problem. Michigan is amazing. You got trounced by 30. I don't love it, but like, no problem. Like, Houston had a chance to win that game and just didn't. Okay, no problem. None of those losses will hurt you. And St. John's, NC State, they beat Oregon. Like they've taken care of business in certain spots to feel pretty good against a really tough schedule. That Auburn team is one of the most talented pound for pound teams in this league, because Tahad Pettiford can go and Keyshawn Hall can really score. And then Keyshawn Murphy is another guy who hasn't been fully healthy yet, but he could really play. We saw that often last year at Mississippi State. And then Overton is solid. Elijah Freeman is really athletic. He's a little bit like Wilkins. He could have like one of those insane dunks. You're like, oh my goodness gracious. Like you breathe different air than the rest of us. And then, the other thing with Auburn too is Sebastian Williams-Adams, their freshman, type of forward, has really turned into one of my favorite role players in the league. Like he passes, he can dribble, he doesn't shoot, but he rebounds like hell. He's awesome on the glass, like defensively super physical, can protect the rim, guards on the perimeter, guards in the paint. Like he does a lot of things well. So I think if you're picking an SEC team, or maybe even a team in the country to, like, if we have to play the aliens in one-on-one, like, you're picking Auburn, because Pettiford can score in one-on-one. You're picking Hall to score in one-on-one in any situation. So we'll learn a lot about like Georgia's individual defenders in that regard. Like, can they match up against a mismatch hunting four like Hall? Can they be able to really put like a great lead guard like Pettiford? Can we put him in a bind? And can you like not let Auburn get out in transition and get open shots? Because when Auburn's in open floor in transition, like they're really, really talented. And I think we'll also learn a lot about like the maturity of this Georgia half court offense, because Auburn doesn't have great rim protection this year. Like last year, it felt like driving to the paint against them was like a horrible idea, because Dylan Cardwell is going to send that thing to the fourth row, and obviously Janai Broom's big and strong and physical. They don't have like that back end like awesome rim protector this year. And so I think the teams that can really pound the paint, pound the glass, and get after it, and really rack up a lot of shots at the rim could give Auburn some issues. And we'll see if Georgia's guards can continually, find a way to get 2 feet into the paint and be effective in that matchup.
Sugar Bowl on January 1st, drive back from New Orleans January 2nd, go to that game on January 3rd. It's like our buddy John Rothstein said, we sleep in May, Isaac.
Well, it might be June because now with the portal, who knows?
Can't
But
can't wait.
you'll have your hands full.
Can't wait. Can't wait. Well, Isaac, I appreciate the time so much. I want to give you the opportunity. Shout out anything you're working on, your socials, just where everybody can find your great work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Isaac _Trotter. And then my stuff's on cbssports.com, a little bit on 247 as well. And then, yeah, this week I'm working on 10, like my top trends of the week. So some role players that I like, I was checking in on my preseason takes of top 10 offenses and which ones have kind of like where they're at after 6 weeks and who's played well, who hasn't. I really whiffed on Kentucky in that exercise. So if you want to go read that, that's really fun. And then I later this week I'll have some grades pieces, kind of working on like which backcourts have really impressed me so far this year, maybe played better than they thought. I would maybe keep an eye on a potential Georgia inclusion in an article like that.
That will always be a nice way to get some of the listeners to check out your work. Well, Isaac, I appreciate the time. I want to say thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Go make sure and check out Isaac's great content. Go to Dogs 24/7, get subscribed, get ready. Like we talked about, Sugar Bowl coming up, basketball. We're not that far from SEC play. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast, rate and review. Helps us a ton. Subscribe to the YouTube Dogs 24/7, the TikTok as well, as we get ready to close out 2025 and go headfirst into 2026. So we'll end the episode right there. For Isaac Trotter, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.